Women's fashion in Victorian England was known for a heavy emphasis on modesty, convolution, and unwieldiness over characteristics such as practicality, style, or even the ability to breathe properly. The dresses had bustles, petticoats, hoops, crinolines, and a million other undergarments that made the women look like they were walking around wearing miniature tents. For many, this fashion was a source of frustration, but the 40 Elephants saw in it an opportunity to steal everything that wasn't nailed down. After all, what better place to stash your ill-gotten goods than a dress big enough to hide a small pony? But who exactly were the 40 Elephants? They were one of London's most infamous criminal gangs of the late 19th and early 20th centuries, and they were comprised entirely of women. Some of you might be familiar with them thanks to the new TV drama 1,000 Blows, and today we will take a look at the true story behind the 40 Elephants. Welcome back to Biographics. I'm your host, Cosmic Horror Madman Eric Malachite, and today's script was provided by Radu Alexander. So be sure to show him some love in the comments as you deploy your likes, subscribe and ring that bell, and share this video with someone who loves learning about historical figures. Let's get to it. Let's start off with the name. Why was a gang of women thieves called the 40 Elephants? The elephants part is fairly straightforward. The group operated out of an area in South London known as Elephant and Castle, which in turn got its unusual name from an eponymous pub and coaching inn that had been around since 1765. Why 40 is a thing is a bit more unclear, although the most obvious answer suggests that there were 40 members in the gang, at least at one point. At its height, the criminal group was active all throughout London, not just Elephant and Castle, and even in other cities. So it is unlikely that its membership remained limited to just 40 people for its entire existence, which stretched from the late 19th century to the mid-20th century. The 40 Elephants were also sometimes referred to as the 40 Thieves, but that name doesn't really have the same ring to it. The first mention of either moniker appeared in newspapers in 1873, but it is impossible to know how long before they had been around. It could have been a century or even earlier. Police records suggest the existence of an organized ring of female thieves active in London ever since the late 1700s, but any connection to the 40 Elephants is pure speculation. Even if the group had existed prior to the 1870s, it would have been too loosely organized to pose any serious problem. The main reason why the 40 Elephants eventually became so prolific was because the collective learned to operate as a well-oiled machine, with each member knowing and playing her specific role. And the credit for that crucial transformation usually goes to a woman named Mary Karr. Karr has often been described as one of the founders of the 40 Elephants. Whether this is true or not, we can't really say, but she was its most prominent leader during the late 19th century. During Karr's eventual trial in 1896, the police referred to her in court as the Queen of the 40 Thieves, while a contemporary London newspaper described her as noted for her good looks and engaging manners, who managed to get round her a gang of young women who gave her complete obedience as their leader. Despite Karr being portrayed here as the Queen Bee, the 40 Elephants were probably more egalitarian than your average gang. There is even talk of them having a code that all members had to adhere to. Supposedly, the code was written down by a male associate who had an elephant in his name, with the intention of selling it to the press. It was never published, but some of the alleged rules included no drinking before a raid and early hours to bed. Proceeds from a job are equally shared by the group members involved, no matter what their role. Members must not steal from each other, their money or boyfriends. You know what's worse than a gang of 40 women shoplifting in London streets? Discovering how much of my personal information was with data brokers. And with today's sponsor, Delete Me, I found out that 18 of these companies had my personal information. Data brokers are companies that snatch up your personal info and sell or rent that information for a nominal price. And it's not just social media websites. They get this information from all over the internet, including government public records. Now, I'm pretty careful when it comes to what I do and don't do online, but you know something? You can never be too careful. This information included my name, age, past addresses, family members, marital status, and my wife's name as well. And with Delete Me, I was able to get it removed from these websites. Now, full disclosure, you can absolutely do this on your own. Every one of these data brokers has an opt-out process that you can follow. But if you're like me and you don't have the several hours it would likely take to follow that process for every website that has your information, Delete Me will help keep your data more secure by doing all of that for you. So if you want to have a little more peace of mind when it comes to your private data, you can get 20% off Delete Me US consumer plans when you go to joindeleteme.com/biographics and use promo code biographics at checkout. That's joindeleteme.com/biographics, code biographics. Mary Karr's home at 118 Stamford Street became the first headquarters for the 40 Elephants, where they planned their operations. Their usual modus operandi involved shoplifting from all over London, with high-end department stores serving as their preferred target. They took advantage of Victorian fashion, which clothed women in large dresses with multiple layers of undergarments, as well as muffs, hats, and all other sorts of accessories where they could keep their stolen goods. The thieves tailored their outfits by sewing hidden pockets inside them that could stash plenty of loot without looking suspicious. They were further assisted by the prudish attitudes of the day, where women were granted plenty of privacy while they were out doing their shopping. Even when they suspected a thief, not a lot of store detectives or attendants would demand to search their unmentionables for stolen merchandise. The thieves, or hoisters to use the lingo of the day, usually worked in groups of 2 or 3 during their shoplifting sprees, since it was easier to distract the storekeepers that way. The thefts were normally planned in advance, although on occasion temptation got the better of them. In one instance in 1923, gang member Maggie Hughes got a little over-enthusiastic and simply snatched a tray with 34 diamond rings while browsing a jewelry store and tried making a run for it, only to barrel straight into a policeman. She received 3 years in prison for that, which was typically the harshest sentence given out for shoplifting. Alternatively, these women risked up to 12 months of hard labor. Most thefts, however, went much smoother than this. Once the women secured the goods, they had access to a network of fences that would distribute the merchandise throughout London. Rarely did the 40 Elephants keep the stuff they stole for personal use. It made it easier for them to be identified and apprehended. Instead, they preferred to buy their clothes legitimately. High-end stuff, usually, since it made them appear more inconspicuous and respectable while out shopping. Meanwhile, their fences made sure that the goods reached the right people. Small venue items usually went directly to street market traders, since they were either impossible to identify as stolen or they were simply not worth enough for anyone to bother looking for them. Jewelry and similar items were sent to pawnbrokers who didn't ask too many questions. And lastly, clothes were sold to shady shops looking for new inventory. They weren't above replacing the labels and even altering the designs to make them look legit. It was a nice gig, and although it was what the 40 Elephants were most famous for, it was not the only racket they were involved in. Blackmail was up their alley as well. Sometimes it was as easy as seducing a man and then getting him to pay up so his wife didn't find out. Other times, one of the women would approach a male target in a secluded street and accuse him of attacking her. A few of her compatriots would then play the role of eyewitnesses and claim to have seen the whole thing. Most men in this situation preferred to part ways with their money or valuables to avoid a scandal. Occasionally, the 40 Elephants worked longer cons to gain access to high-value targets, such as getting hired as housemaids for wealthy families. They would wait for the right opportunity and make off with the jewels, antiques, and any other valuables they could get away with. Violence was not a common component of the gang's activities, but it also wasn't completely missing. Once the 40 Elephants firmly established themselves, they protected their turf fiercely. In 1895, for example, Mary Karr and several of her cohorts were brought to trial for a vicious attack on a rival named Nellie Stanley, although they managed to beat the charges. Mary Karr's organizational skills were instrumental in getting the 40 Elephants off the ground and establishing them as one of London's top thief rings, be they male or female. However, her time as matriarch couldn't last forever, and her downfall began in 1896, when she was convicted of the kidnapping of 6-year-old Michael McGee. Kidnappings weren't typical fare for the 40 Elephants, but this does show that the members didn't turn up their noses from most criminal activities as long as there was money to be made. As far as we can work out, one of Karl's associates bought the boy from his mother, who wanted nothing to do with him, and Karl was looking after him until they sold him to a childless couple. This was one of the first times when the general public saw just how profitable the hoisting racket was for the 40 Elephants. Mary Karr showed up in court in a splendid black velvet coat trimmed with fur over a black silk dress, her head adorned by a broad-brimmed Rembrandt hat boasting 5 ostrich feathers. On her fingers glittered 7 diamond rings valued by one journalist at more than £300, at a time when a working man's wage was less than £2 a week. We're assuming that Karl wasn't trying to project the image of an honest working-class woman here. If she was, then she failed miserably. More likely that she knew they had her dead to rights, so since she was going to jail anyway, might as well show off for the press. She got 3 years in prison for that, and her hold over the 40 Elephants was never the same again. Soon after Karl was released, she was arrested again in 1900 for receiving stolen goods and got another 2 years. Later in 1909, she was implicated in a jewelry store robbery and then was exposed as a con artist posing as a socialite in Manchester. While Karl was in prison, someone else had to take over the 40 Elephants. We can't tell you who her immediate successor was, but we know that by the 1920s, the 40 Elephants had a new head honcho, Alice Diamond. She was born in 1896 in either Lambeth or Southwark. Sources seem a bit uncertain on that point, but it was in South London either way. If you've seen the show, this is where it takes a significant departure from reality, since Alice Diamond appears in the show, although in real life, she hadn't even been born yet when the action takes place. We don't know how she rose through the ranks of the 40 Elephants so quickly, but her criminal career got off to a fast start. By the time she was a teenager, she had already been arrested multiple times for theft. During World War I, she got pinched for using a fake ID to enter an ammunition factory, presumably to steal explosives to blow up safes. Alice Diamond had the brains and the guts to make it to the top. Police called her the cleverest of thieves, but also warned that she had a punch to beware of. Alice was known as Diamond Annie due to her fondness for wearing a lot of diamond rings, but she did not hesitate to turn them into the world's most expensive knuckle duster when the situation called for it. Under her leadership, the 40 Elephants reached the pinnacle of success, making more money and extending their reach further than under Mary Karr. Soon enough, they became rich enough to fully embrace the extravagant lifestyle that they portrayed during their shoplifting sprees. They could be seen wearing fancy clothes and expensive jewelry, driving fast cars, and attending the trendiest nightclubs and restaurants in London. This lifestyle does come with a significant drawback, though: increased attention. You see, when you're a criminal, there are some groups of people you want attention from, and some you don't. The police, for example, fall firmly in the second category, as do your targets. After years and years of shoplifting, London's store owners, attendants, and detectives were far more guarded when it came to the female clients who entered their establishments. Plus, it just wasn't as easy to hide things anymore. The trendy but shortened body-fitting flapper dresses of the 1920s were nowhere near as spacious or inconspicuous as the fashion of the previous century. Alice Diamond's reign on top lasted only a few years. She and several gang members were arrested in 1925 for taking part in a brutal attack in Lambeth, and Diamond was sentenced to 18 months in prison. Although a new matriarch, Lillian Kendall, immediately took her place, the 40 Elephants went on a decline, and the gang never recovered. The Great Depression and World War II probably didn't help either. As their takes got smaller and smaller, their numbers started to dwindle. Eventually, sometime during the 1950s, the 40 Elephants simply vanished, leaving behind a curious criminal legacy of the all-women gang that thrived in a man's world. And thanks again to Delete Me for sponsoring this video. Remember to follow the link in the description and pinned comment to get 20% off your subscription. It's a small price to pay to help keep your private data safe from bad actors. I hope you learned something today, and if you enjoyed this video, be sure to deploy your likes, comment a historical figure we should cover next, subscribe and ring that bell, and share this video with someone who loves learning about historical figures. I'm Eric Malachite, and we'll see you next time.